Ever needed a cheat sheet for what to listen to? I save you the time. Hey guys, and welcome to the latest in the sound episodes of Owen Sound, and today I'm going to be going through the best and most notable records of January in 2017. Since I just don't have time to review every record that comes out in any given month, I thought I'd give a roundup of my favorite records and some of the more notable records that come out in every month, as it just doesn't feasibly make sense for me to be reviewing just about everything that comes out in a long and lengthy video or written review. First up is Voyager by Fleece. This is the latest record by the band, and it really took me by surprise. I had never listened to the band before, and only upon learning about this record had I even recognized that I'd seen some of their records in the store before. But this record was one of these albums that I could listen to top to bottom over and over again without ever feeling like I ever had to skip a song. It was just one of these albums that you could just put on and just do something or intently listen to it, and you would really never get bored of it, and it just seems to work. Blending a mix of psychedelic rock, jazz, and even some harmonies and some prog rock, that album is just a really cool mix that really kind of leans into each one in a way that keeps the album fresh every time you listen to it, and even going to song. And the tracks I'm going to recommend on this one are Under the Lights, On My Mind, and What You've Done, and of course the title track, Voyager. Next up is Ty Segall's 8th and self-titled record, Ty Segall. With somebody so prolific, you can't really expect a bad record at this point, especially since none of his records have ever been like just this crazy monumental thing that you would say, oh, he's definitely like 100% peaked here. With a Wikipedia page that would make the late Prince or even David Bowie blush, Ty Segall has just been releasing so much music over the past couple years with just his solo work and even his different collaborations that I'm not even surprised that this latest record is one that doesn't really disappoint as much as it doesn't blow minds. For any Ty Segall fans, this one definitely leans more into the classic rock with a couple leanings into some alt stuff as usual. Notable tracks include Break a Guitar, Thank You Mr. K, and the very Sex Bob-omb sounding Freedom. Next up was Cloud Nothing's Life Without Sound. Now, genre-wise, this is really a band that I would never get into normally. I listened to this record for work, and I found it was a really great post-punk record. Especially as somebody that doesn't listen to a lot of post-punk, I found it really more enjoyable than I was really expecting, given that the band kind of stays away from some of the vocal and tonal trappings that a lot of these bands have that make them end up sounding the same or sounding okay at first, and then they pull out some weird thing with their voice that kind of just throws the whole thing off. I just found overall this was really one of these records where I was like, oh, this is, you know, why people get into the genre, and it really kind of shed any of like the, I guess, prejudice I had towards post-punk away. This set, as eye-opening as this record was, I don't really have a notable track to point out to you. Next up is Nothing Feels Natural by DC punk band Priest. Priest have been kind of surging through the underground for the past couple years now in New York, and I've just been super excited to see when their full-length record came out. Coming off of their last record, Bodies in Control and Money and Power, I was really wondering if the band had moved away from some of the more heavy punk leanings that they had in their last record, but it really seems like they just made it a little more sophisticated, and really made the intensity of it burn even brighter than before. This said too, the band really doesn't stray away from the fun and intensity that these older songs had, and overall I really feel like this is a really great growing up record for the band, although I do feel like some of these older punk songs are still just as great. Some awesome tracks to listen to include JJ, Nikki, and No Big Bang. Next up is the Donald Trump Predicting Future Politics by Astra. The very dystopian record by the Toronto musician was one of the cooler records this year, really, especially with all the dystopian feels on the record and the weird ways that it kind of predicted the Trump presidency, and I just found overall it was a musically very strong record. Katie Stelmanis' voice is just as amazing as usual, and hearing her production behind the entire album is really cool, as it really seems like she's really giving you the record that she's always wanted to put out. Notable tracks include the title track Future Politics, Utopia, and Angel in Your Eye. Next up was the shockingly disappointing Oxymelody by The Flaming Lips. Now, as much as I'm a huge fan of Embryonic by The Flaming Lips, and even grew to love The Terror for just the complete musicianship that they put behind it, I really just found this record was one where they kind of stretched things a little too much in the exploration realm, where some of the band's earlier exploration leanings seem to work really well and have this constant drive but sonic, I guess, diversity that they had before. These ones just never seem to pick up and go anywhere like some tracks on Embryonic go, that to make these slower moments on the record work, as the entire record feels kind of slow. And overall, it really just hasn't had the same sense of life and just searching that these earlier records like The Terror and Embryonic had, as this just feels like a continuation of what they're trying to do on these records and not them returning back to the pop Flaming Lips that they were a couple years ago before all this, which is also an interesting band in its own right. If I would recommend one track on this record though, I would say The Castle is definitely one that's worth listening to. Just a quick one off is the XX's I See You. Now I've been kind of just a cursory fan of the XX for the past couple years, but I listened to this latest album and it didn't really grab me yet. I feel like this is one that may grow to grab me over time. It had the kind of samey feel from top to bottom for me as well, and I found this is one of these records that I just felt wasn't for me, but I didn't feel like it was necessarily a bad record. Another quick one off is Sone's Renin. I really don't know what I was expecting on this record. I heard some leading track and it really grabbed me quite a bit, but once the record actually came out, it tended to just be a mix of songs that were either poppy and too generic or too experimental and weird to really be completely grabbing. Although there are some moments in the record that I think are totally worth listening to, I just found overall it wasn't one that I really was gonna come back to. Julie Byrne's Not Even Happiness is also one of these cool acoustic albums that I found hits harder emotionally than you'd expect, especially if you're somebody like me that is going to be listening to a lot more rock albums and other stuff like that. I found this is one of these records that every so often I do have one of these more acoustic and very less sonically exploring records that still hits me in this very hard way like this record does. Terry Glazer's Apocalyptic is one of these records that I thought I would enjoy a lot more. It is a pretty cool record overall, but I just found some of the songs were just kind of too not doing something crazy exceptional, which is kind of like the overall problem with the record, is that it's always kind of good but never exceptional. And I also found like older songs like Sip of Poison had these older versions that had come out before the record came out that I even prefer more just for being more raw than the slightly more produced, and I guess kind of pulling away the raw feel that these old songs had in the older versions. This had notable tracks, do include Sip of Poison and the song Told You I'd Be With the Guys. Next up is Foxygen's Hang. This is really a great return to form for the band, really coming off of their last album and Star Power, which sounded like it was going to be their last album and really was a really low down note that really would have really tarnished the band's great albums leading up to that. Although not as long as you'd expect from a band, especially after their recent really long album, the album is packed with some really great songs, especially some of the early half of the album, which pulls from their usual gallery of ELO and the Rolling Stones, as well as the Manfred Park, as hilariously parodied by Weird Al in Jurassic Park. Notable tracks are Avalon, Follow the Leader, and On Lancashire. Lastly was the first album to come out this year, and this is the Run the Jewels 3. This is the band just moving forward even more. There's a couple less bangers on this album. I don't really think there's anything that's kind of comparable to Blockbuster Night Part 2, but there's some really great tracks here, and I feel like the band's really pushing their production. There's a lot of hints to 90s hip-hop influence in their production too, with some interesting, I guess, cut-ins through the audio, playing with the lyrics quite a lot in this one. And the social commentary is even more cutting than ever, with each song really providing its own different commentary without having that many tracks where they're just having like some cool party track. And as fun as it would be to have these kinds of tracks on here, I feel like it would have detracted from what a great album this is, especially considering it coming out with the whole Trump presidency that they're so against. And I feel like overall this might actually be the best album that they've ever put out, even though a lot of people will probably be clamoring for RTJ2 for the longest time. So that's it, guys. As always, you can check out the Owen Sound blog and everything I'm doing movie related at The Real Deal Podcast at soundcloud.com/real_deal. So going off of this, I want to ask you guys, what's your most anticipated album of 2017?